The Bible, love it or hate it, is a book filled with puzzles and mysteries. It will be our task to unravel as many of them as possible. We want to understand the Bible as a human book, not a book inspired by a god. I'm Robert M. Price, and this is The Human Bible. I am your host, Robert Price, and this is The Human Bible. The Human Bible is a radio show and podcast of the Center for Inquiry, a think tank advancing science, reason, freedom of inquiry, and humanistic values in public affairs and at the grassroots. And now, once again, let's start the show by getting up to speed.
Up to speed.
Now, often I'm dealing with building blocks of biblical criticism, and I guess this counts as one, but I think a fairly important, more or less basic thing in the Bible that's been pointed out by skeptics and scoffers, but rightly so, is a particular form of story. And remember, we're kind of following a trajectory of form criticism, the study of particular types of literary units that recur in the Bible. And this one is the cautionary tale. Now, you probably know what this means, right? The Bible is not the only source of them, obviously. The point of a cautionary tale is a warning, an example, whether fictive or real, where you say, now, this happened to these guys, and as the old venereal disease movies shown to new Army recruits says, men, don't let this happen to you. They're basically scare stories, and there are a good number of them in the Bible, and this is kind of important because it's from a critical standpoint, in the scholarly sense, yeah, you want to recognize what you're reading and what the point of it is. But from an ethical and even theological standpoint, it's important to realize that there are scare tactics used. This is what those great old rationalists and village atheists used to refer to as priestcraft. The kind of thing that the religious higher-ups would use to keep people in their place. Let me just read a couple and just mention a couple more of these stories. One goodie is in Leviticus 10, verses 1 through 3. Now, Nadab and Abihu, the son, any Hebrew speakers, feel free to correct me on these pronunciations. This is how I've done it for years, though. Now, Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it and laid incense on it and offered unholy fire before Yahweh, such as he had not commanded them. And fire came forth from the presence of Yahweh and devoured them, and they died before Yahweh. Then Moses said to Aaron, this is what Yahweh has said. I will show myself holy among those who are near me, that is the priests who approach the altar, and before all the people I will be glorified. And Aaron held his peace. What's that about? Well, there are pretty specific directions for mixing incense, getting the formula just right. And in Protestant churches, you practically never learn what this is, but in Catholic churches and other religions, there is this practice that I really get a kick out of. It really creates the ambiance. Sprinkling the incense and having the smoke of it sort of create this atmosphere. It's great. But suppose you did it wrong. Well, the point here is, hey, you priests, this is priestcraft aimed at fellow priests. Again, men, don't let this happen to you. Don't mix that formula wrong because you might get a little more fire than you're counting on. Now, you might say, wouldn't it be pretty easy to show that this is not going to happen? Just do your own formula and stand back. Well, of course, the point was you don't dare try it. And if this happened once, it might happen again. And, if the stakes being what they are, you're not going to test it. So there's one. Now, you might ask yourself, what the heck is this doing in the Bible? Well, I'm telling you right now, it's a warning. And just don't step out of line. Here's a goodie that applies not just to priests, but to the rest of us slobs. In Numbers 15, and you thought the Pentateuch was boring. Oh, no. 15 verses 32 through 36. While the people of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. And those who found him gathering sticks brought him to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation. They put him in custody because it had not been made plain what should be done to him. And Yahweh said to Moses, "The man shall be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp." And all the congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him to death with stones, as Yahweh had commanded Moses. What's this? Well, it says don't work on the Sabbath. That's one of the commandments, right? What happens if you don't obey that and you do go out and you say, wait a minute, the guy's just gathering kindling wood. Well, that's the point. They're taking a petty offense and saying it's not so petty because you're violating the Sabbath, you're going to die. You might be thinking of a passage in one of those great biblical epics, The Life of Brian of Nazareth, Monty Python, right, where this guy, Matthias, son of Deuteronomy of Gath, is about to be stoned to death. But all I said was, this halibut is good enough for Jehovah. Well, you weren't supposed to say that name, so he's supposed to get crushed by stones, so he manages to sneak out of it. But yeah, now, did they do this every time they found somebody breaking the Sabbath? Well, I guess they couldn't really find out, and it's not clear to me what sort of police structure they had, but this was, again, supposed to be enough to make you not even think of it, right? Let's see now. There are a couple of real great ones here. In 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 through 25, about the prophet Elisha. And he went up from there, we talked about this recently, but, can't help mention it here. He went up from there to Bethel, and while he was going up on the way, some small boys came out of the city and jeered at him, saying, "Go up, you bald head! Go up, you bald head!" And he turned around, and when he saw them, he cursed them in the name of Yahweh. And 2 she-bears came out of the woods and tore 42 of the boys. From there he went on to Mount Carmel, and thence he returned to Samaria, all in a day's work for the itinerant man of God. What? Well, again, hey, don't mock, bald people? Well, that's not really the point. Don't mock the prophets of God. Now, why would people mock them? Well, that raises interesting questions. They make predictions that didn't come true. This actually implies they did quite often in the Old Testament. But doesn't really matter. They don't much care for this guy, but they should because, you never know when a couple of bears, Mrs. Smokey and Mrs. Yogi, are going to come out and you'll be in big trouble. So, kids, take a lesson. Perhaps the weirdest is in 2 Samuel. Now, I don't mean weird in the sense that it's nonsensical. It isn't. I think I know what they're getting at. But it's very strange sounding to us. 2 Samuel 6, 1 through 7. King David is trying to relocate the Ark of the Covenant, and David again gathered all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000, and David arose and went with all the people who were with him from Baal, Judah, to bring up from there the Ark of God, which is called by the name of Yahweh Sabaoth, who sits enthroned on it. On the cherubim. They're carved on the top of it. And they carried the Ark of God, an ark means a box, a chest, upon a new cart, and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, and Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, were driving the new cart with the ark of God. And Ahio went before the ark, and David and all the house of Israel were making merry before Yahweh with all their might, celebratory dances, right? With songs, lyres, harps, tambourines, castanets, and cymbals. And if they were Pentecostals, it'd be electric guitars. And when they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. And the anger of Yahweh was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there because he put forth his hand to the ark. And he died there beside the ark of God. Oh, what? And it says David was angry at God for doing this. So it's not like, oh yeah, sure, of course, that's what happens. What's the point? Well, in this case, the guy's apparently not a priest, but even if he is, he has not done the proper ritual preparation they thought necessary before touching the extreme holy relic. And it's like in the chapter 18 of Exodus, I think, when God is about to descend upon the mountain to give the commandments, and he says, keep everybody back behind the ropes, because if even so much as an animal strays close and touches the base of the mountain, it will be destroyed because of the glory of Yahweh or Jehovah. And that's the idea. The guy didn't do anything immoral. He was trying to stop this gross desecration of the holy ark falling into the ditch after all. And that's the point. They're hyping it up to say, even in a case like that, when your intentions are good, don't touch the ark without priestly ritual preparation, or it'll be like sticking your finger in an electrical socket. Such is the palpable holiness of God. Seen that way, the story isn't ridiculous, though it's just dealing with a category we hardly have anymore of holiness as a divine power and so on. That's what was at stake, though, and it's a cautionary tale. You could get blasted the same way, sucker, so don't do it. Well, do moderns have to worry much about that? There isn't an Ark of the Covenant anymore. Well, how about a New Testament version of this? I just love this one. Acts chapter 5. It's talking about how people were donating gifts, property, and stuff, cashing in real estate and giving the money to the apostles to redistribute. Acts 5:1, a man named Ananias with his wife Sapphira sold a piece of property, and with his wife's knowledge, he kept back some of the proceeds and brought only a part and laid it at the apostles' feet. Uh-oh. But Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back part of the proceeds of the land? While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not at your disposal? How is it that you've contrived this deed in your heart? You've not lied to men, but to God. When Ananias heard these words, he fell down and died, and great fear came upon all who heard of it. The young men rose and wrapped him up and carried him out and buried him. Then his wife comes in, and he gives her the sting question. Did you get so-and-so amount of money for this land? Yeah, we did. Okay, you're dead too. And that same thing happens to her. Again, don't welch on your church pledge, right? That's obviously what's going on here. And the great fear fell upon them. It's like a laugh track on a sitcom, right? It's trying to control the reaction of the hearer or the reader. Ooh, I better not do that. So there's other ones too. The whole 7th chapter of Joshua is another one of these. That's too long to read. But yeah, there are these rather nasty cautionary tales in the Bible. And so I hope you take a hint there. That's you wouldn't want anything nasty to happen, now would you? I'd like to introduce a new segment that we call Audience Inquisition. That's got very positive tones to it, doesn't it? And the idea here is that I'm asking you for some info rather than the other way around. Each time it'll be a different question I'd like somebody out there to respond to. And this one, the initial one, is as follows. Have you ever heard somebody quote something from the Bible that turns out not to be in the Bible? And if so, what was it? Now, sometimes preachers will say, it ain't in the Bible, but it ought to be. But sometimes they'll actually say, the Bible says, and it doesn't. That's probably how some stuff got into the Bible. So I bet you've heard some of these. Please let us know by calling into our Human Bible hotline at 716-71-BIBLE. Or you can always email us or tweet at us, too. Then next episode, we'll play some of your responses on the show and talk about it. Well, now I'd like to take some of your questions, and this is a real goodie. Oh, this is very near and dear to my heart. Heather asks on Facebook, where are the original writings that make up the Bible? Who has access to them? If you were to recreate, or if you wanted to recreate the Bible from scratch, relying on only your own translations, would you be able to? Well, two things here. We don't have any of the so-called autographs, that is what the authors would have written. They are long gone. I'm not sure why. I mean, it's given the vicissitudes of ancient manuscripts. They probably just wore out or whatever. Could have been destroyed, who knows. We just have, of course, copies of copies of copies, and they're not so far removed from the originals that we have to be utterly skeptical about whether we're reading what was originally written. There's some doubt there, but yeah, we pretty much have these things, manuscripts of them, and if you look at any modern version of the Bible, they have compared manuscripts to weed out copying errors to the degree they can. And you can read them in, of course, obviously, as you know, in the Bible, but you can also look at some of the books that were passed over. Amazingly, we still have copies of quite a number of those. Some of them reside in the so-called pseudepigrapha, or pseudonymous writings of the Old Testament. There's a huge 2-volume set edited by Charlesworth, and that's a very handy thing, and there's oodles of the material that some people considered scripture, but generally the Jewish and Christian communities didn't. And the same with the New Testament. There's the Nag Hammadi Gnostic Library. There's various editions of what's called the Apocryphal New Testament that just collects all these things. I mean, there's no official canon of non-canonical works, but you could, with some trouble, track down the original language versions if you wanted to translate them. And could you make your own cut? Well, you sure could. I don't know who else would be convinced by it, but I say it's near and dear to my heart because I actually did this. There is a book of mine published by Signature Books called the Pre-Nicene New Testament. And what I did there was to do my own translations from the Greek of the usual official 27 books of the New Testament, and then another 27 ancient books, more or less contemporary, early Christian books of various kinds, stemming from groups considered heretical by the winners in the struggle. So I've got like Jewish, Christian, Gnostic, and various interesting works. So there's the Jewish Christian anti-gospel, the Toledoth Yeshu. There's a Mandean book about John the Baptist. There's a Sufi Islamic collection of the sayings of Jesus, and so on. And so I put them together, and my goal was not just to provide a source book for scholars, though I hope it's that too, but my goal was to try to redo the canon of the New Testament, canon official list. Now, anybody could do this, and in fact, there were many different canon lists in the early church, and it's quite a fascinating exercise. It has no authority to it, of course, right? Just because it's printed between book covers doesn't mean, oh, well, this is the real Bible. But it's exactly the experiment you are suggesting. Anybody could do it. What do you think ought to be in the Bible? Fascinating exercise. So again, I wouldn't have brought this up if you hadn't. But for an example, you might look at my pre-Nicene New Testament signature books, still available in the lobby. No, kidding. In an email, Andrew asks, I never really thought of this very much. He says, what are the most distant places from Jerusalem that seem to be referred to in the Bible? Wikipedia led me to Esther 8:9, where India and Ethiopia are mentioned, at least in the translation I looked at. Are there any other faraway, real places mentioned in the Bible? That's about as far as it goes, as far as I know. And you're right about do these things really correspond to the territories we know as India and Ethiopia? They probably do, but it's worth noting that in the ancient world, a lot of Hellenistic writers didn't quite know the difference and tended to confuse India and Ethiopia. They speak of one when their descriptions imply they're really talking about the other. So it's hard to say, but I guess they got both bases covered in Esther. Now, some people think that Russia is mentioned in the book of Ezekiel, but that's probably based on a mistranslation. It comes from the word Rosh, which in context means chief or head of state, a headman. And it probably is not a reference to that, though Ezekiel does mention Scythians, that is, people from the Black Sea area, but that's not too far away. George Lamsa, in his fascinating The Holy Bible from Ancient Eastern Manuscripts, has Ezekiel referring, I think it's the passage where he's talking about Gog and Magog, around 37, 38, somewhere in there in Ezekiel. And he translates it as Russia and China, but that's really gratuitous, I think. I believe he's just interpreting there rather than translating. When you look at the Table of Nations in Genesis, chapter 11, I believe it is, where it tries to trace everybody they knew of from the sons of Noah, they don't get very far. Nobody knew anything about South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, China, etc., etc. So, very good question. And if I'm missing something, I'd appreciate it if somebody would point it out. I never mind correction. I always welcome correction. So, please do not hesitate. Well, one of my favorite segments, I think of what Gordon Fee, a New Testament professor of mine, said at Gordon Conwell Seminary, Lothies, many years ago. He's lecturing in a New Testament intro class, and I think he's talking about Luke, I forget which, but he says, and this is my favorite gospel, but really they're all my favorites. And having said that, here's my favorite. Well, I guess that's the same way. Each one is my favorite while I'm doing it. Is that in the Bible?
Is that in the Bible?
In this case, what I'm doing is not saying here's something in the Bible that is so darn weird you can hardly believe it's in there. But here's something people think is in the Bible, but it isn't because they're misinterpreting it. And this is the famous Onan passage in Genesis 38. It happened at that time, verse 1, that Judah went down from his brothers and turned into a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. There Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He married her and went in to her. Take that either way you want. She conceived and bore a son, and he called his name E-R. Probably not the same one Plato's talking about. Again, she conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. Yeah, you know where this is going. Yet, again, she bore a son, and she called his name Shelah. She was in Chezib when she bore him. I'm glad they didn't leave that detail out. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of Yahweh, and Yahweh slew him. Woo. Then Judah said to Onan, "Go in to your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her and raise up offspring for your brother." But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So when he went in to his brother's wife, he spilled the semen on the ground, lest he should give offspring to his brother. And what he did was displeasing in the sight of Yahweh, and he slew him also. And of course, this is another cautionary tale, right? Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Remain a widow in your father's house till Shelah, my son, grows up." It's like, what were their names? Mike, Robbie, and Chip, my three sons here. For he feared that he would die like his brothers. So Tamar went and dwelled in her father's house. Well, the real story gets even more interesting, but that's enough for us at the moment. Now, what the heck did Onan do or not do? Is this a biblical condemnation of masturbation? That's the relevance most people find in it. The Bible says not to masturbate. Does it? That's not in the Bible. The text is, but that meaning isn't. Because if you notice the clues in here, what duty did either Onan or Shelah have to their late brother and to his widow? What is that? What do they mean? Well, this is the practice outlined elsewhere in the Bible of levirate marriage in Latin, that is, brother marriage. The idea was to secure inheritance rights for the transmission of property. And so the notion was, if a guy marries a woman and he dies before he can beget children, what's going to happen to the property? And, that's what you do then, is to find the brother, or if not that, a cousin, whatever, the closest male relative, and he will try to impregnate the widow. And if he does, the offspring will not be considered his own, but will legally be the sons of his late brother, just so the inheritance streams can continue straight. Right, and that's what they're talking about here, that his heritage and his lineage and so forth should, in fact, the kids that Onan would have had with Tamar would have been considered legally the sons of the first one. Right, so that's what's happening. And Onan, understandably, when it's his turn, says, "Look, I want these kids to be mine. If I'm going to beget kids, they should be mine. I'm not going to do this." And so what does he do? He spills his seed or semen on the ground. Why? Because he's masturbating? No. I guess you could say conceivably that on the night he's supposed to have sex with her, he prevents that by masturbating at home so he doesn't have any more ammo when the time comes. I suppose that's possible, though usually one thinks of coitus interruptus, withdrawal here. But the point is not how he does it, but that he's cheating her of offspring to be considered her late husband's heirs. He's flouting the law of levirate marriage, and that's why God offs the poor SOB. So this is not even... Nobody is, I guess it's weird to cite this against masturbation, but it would somehow be even weirder if those who say the Bible is legally normative, we ought to follow it today, if they really did take this seriously and tried to reinstitute levirate marriage. Can you imagine the chaos that would result from that? Oh boy, I'm telling you. Though at least they didn't think that it required execution, because notice it says God killed him, implying that, the elders or whatever didn't. So it was just divine providence, but again, a cautionary tale, because he might do it to you too. So is a warning against masturbation in the Bible? Nah, it's not. Sorry about that. You better have some other good reason for that. I guess not too many people think it'll make you go blind, so that one's out. But this is out too. There's just no scriptural justification for that one. Well, that's it for another exciting episode of the Human Bible. I'll see you next time, or you'll hear me, or whatever it is, but we'll be in touch again. Thanks for joining me on this episode of The Human Bible. To send us questions or comments on the show, which we really hope you do, you can email questions@thehumanbible.net or feedback@thehumanbible.net. We're also on Twitter @HumanBible, on Facebook @/TheHumanBible. And you can even leave a voicemail on our Human Bible hotline by calling 716-71-BIBLE. You can get all that information and more on our website, thehumanbible.net. Views expressed on the Human Bible aren't necessarily the views of the Center for Inquiry, nor its affiliated organizations. The Human Bible is produced by Adam Isaac in Amherst, New York, and features contributions from Debbie Goddard. I'm your host, Robert M. Price.